I don't wanna go to school because I'm stupid. I don't want nobody telling me what to do.
Hello people, I'm gonna make a little video summary on Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles because I'm bored and this is what I like to do with my free time. So Tess of the D'Urbervilles kind of kicks it off, and there's this dude named John, his last name's D'Urberville, and he's walking home, and every single time he's walking home there's this pastor, reverend dude, I don't really know what his official title was, and whenever they're walking by, the pastor always greets him and says, "What's up, Sir John?" And of course, John D'Urberville, just being a common farmer dude, is like, "Why you call me sir?" And so one night, this one night in particular, he asked the pastor, he's like, "Boy, like, what's the deal with the whole sir thing?" And the pastor's like, "Well, didn't you know you're a descendant of this really old family? They got skeletons buried down in this big fancy town in granite coffins, and you're a part of a big old bloodline." Obviously, to John D'Urberville, he's like, "Well, I'm part of a big thing. Now I'm a big deal because these people are rich and esteemed. So now I'm inherently rich and esteemed because that's how it works." Okay. So that's how it kicks off, and that's how basically the whole plight of Tess of the D'Urbervilles gets all started. So we first meet Tess when she's in this thing called a walking party, and all these girls and some of the older women, basically the unmarried people in the town, or the unmarried women in the town, all dress up in their nice white, like, Sunday dress. They go get these nice white flowers, and they all walk through the middle of town, and that's where we meet Tess, because she's walking, and one of the people that's with her is like, "Isn't that your dad?" And her dad's like, "Hey, yo, we're part of a big family, and I'm gonna go get drunk because of it." Tess is like, "I don't know what he's talking about." And eventually the walking party makes it into the center of town, and they're all dancing. And there's this one guy, and he's got his 3 sons with him, and they're all like really like, God. This guy and his 3 sons walk through and see all the girls dancing, and one of the sons is like, "I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna dance with some of these girls. You guys just go, I'll catch up in a little while." So he dances with them, and Tess is like, "Whoa." And the guy's kind of like, doesn't really notice because he's covered in all these girls, like, randomly. The guy doesn't really notice, but then he's running to catch up because he stayed longer than he should have. He's running to catch up, he turns around, and he sees Tess just standing there, like, and so he's like, and then he just runs away. And that's the most that you hear about that guy. In light of their recent discovery of wealth, John has gone and gotten drunk and pretty much incapacitated, and so they're walking home, and they're like, "Well, shoot, if he's this, like, messed up, he's going to be so hungover tomorrow, he's not even going to be able to get up at, like, 2 or 3 in the morning, or whenever they have to get up to go deliver these beehives to market so that we can actually make money." And Tessa's like, "Well, shoot, guess I'll do it then." So she gets up with her little brother and does it. Here's where it all goes wrong, though. She gets up and they're out, and it's late, and she's like, "You know what, Abraham," who's her brother, "you can go to sleep. Like, you can just sleep for a while. I'm just gonna ride on." And then she falls asleep, and this guy, he's like a postman. He's like riding his horse in his carriage really, really fast, and he kills their horse, Prince. He hits them, they get killed, the horse gets killed, and it's really sad. And Tessa's like, "Oh no, like, I killed the horse, like, what am I gonna do?" So Tess comes back and she's like, "Sorry, Dad, Mom, I killed the horse. What can I do?" And her mom and her dad come up with this idea, and they're like, "Okay, get this. You go out to the D'Urbervilles. Hey, so turns out I'm actually a family, so you guys can pay us now." And Tess is like, "I don't really want to, but I will, I guess, if you guys want me to, because, I killed the horse and all that." So off Tess goes, and she gets to the D'Urberville estate. She's walking up, and she's like, "Hey, I'm here to see Miss D'Urberville," this guy that she meets, and he's like, "Yeah, that's my mom. I'm Alec. We can talk." And he's like, the internal dialogue that's suggested in the book is he's like, "Whoa, she's beautiful, really pretty girl." And then, so she gets kind of like twisted, forced into talking to Alec D'Urberville, and he's like feeding her strawberries and like putting like white roses like in her. Anyway, Alec D'Urberville already giving creepy vibes, right? He's already weird. And then Tess goes home. She's like, yeah, I think it went well, but like not really, because like I didn't actually meet her. Her parents are like, but wait, the dude that you met sent a letter, and he's quite stricken with you, and he actually stopped by too, and he wants you to come and look after this chicken farm because the last guy they had like dipped out. It's basically how it all goes. Is Tess meets this guy who's creepy and stuffs flowers in her shirt, and then he writes Tess's mom a letter and is like, she can come watch our chickens and we'll pay you, and that's how it's gonna work. And Tess is like, I don't really want to, like, this dude gave me weird vibes, but I'll go, I guess. So Tess finally decides. She's like, fine, you know what, I'll go. And Alec is like, I'll go pick you up. I'm gonna pick you up myself. He doesn't actually say that, but he shows up when she's supposed to be getting picked up and is like, you're coming with me. And then they get on the carriage, and Alec is like, this horse is a crazy horse, dude. And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, I always go so fast down these hills. And he starts whipping down a hill, and she's like, ooh, I'm going to put my arm around you because I'm terrified for my life ever since I killed the horse, and now I'm scarred for life around horses. And he's like, can I kiss you? And she's like, I don't think so. And he's like, I'll slow down if you let me kiss you. And she's like, okay, fine. And then he goes to kiss her, and then she's like, actually, never mind. And he's like, God damn it, I'm going to kill us both if you don't let me kiss you. She's like, shit, okay, God. And she lets him kiss her on the cheek, and she's like, she instinctively, like, wipes it away. And he's like, actually, let me kiss you for real. She, like, jumps down, like, off the carriage, and she's like, I'm not going with you anymore if you're going to keep freaking, like, preying on me. It's gross, and I'm going home to my mom, okay? And he's like, nope, you're getting back in. So a few weeks go by. She's arrived at the D'Urberville estate. I mean, nothing really happens there. She's just looking after the chicken. And eventually she's settling in, and she's like, you know what, this is actually kind of cool. One night they go into town, and a bunch of the girls get hammered. She goes walking home, and there's this lady. She has this basket on her head, and her husband really likes this stuff called treacle. It's like honey, like syrup stuff. And it starts leaking down her neck and onto her dress, and she figures it out, and she's like freaking out, trying to rub off her dress in the grass. She like falls on the ground and all that, and everyone's laughing at her because they're all hammered. And then Tess starts laughing, and this lady who has the treacle on her back whips up and goes, "How darest thou laugh at me, hussy?" And then there's like some fight, right? And like just then, as they're in the midst of fighting, like Alec D'Urberville whips in and is like, hey, stop yelling at her. I'm gonna scoop you up on my horse and we're gonna ride away. He like keeps trying to kiss her like he does, and he's like, just put your arm around my waist, just put your arm around my waist, just let me kiss you, etc. And then Tess gets fed up with it, and she's like, I'm walking home, like leave me alone. And he's like, you can't walk home because I don't even know where we are, and I've lived here for a while. I decided I'd take the long way home so that we could hang, but you're not gonna be able to walk. So you stop, I'll figure out the best route for you. So they both hop down off the horse, and then some weird stuff goes down, right? So as is customary of the time period, Thomas Hardy kind of dances around. It's kind of a coarse topic, so he's really obscure about it, and that leads to a lot of confusion as to what actually happens here. So he's acting like, he's like, ooh, you're cold. And she's like, yep, it gets cold in September. He's like, oh, got just the thing. And he goes, he took a druggist's bottle from a parcel on the saddle, and after some trouble in opening it, held it to her mouth unawares. Tess sputtered and coughed, and gasping, it will go on my pretty frock, swallowed as he poured, to prevent the catastrophe she feared. So, what happened there is, he was like, oh, you'll be cold, I know this stuff that'll make you warmer, and he takes out this bottle, and puts it to her mouth, and she's like, I don't want to get my dress ruined. This is my really nice dress, so I'm just going to swallow it. And the coming pages, it gets weird. And there's not a lot discussed. There's not a lot really laid out. But, I mean, they call Alec the spoiler. So, generally what happened here, Alec date raped Tess. He gave her something, said it was to warm her up. And then she fell asleep, and he date raped her, and that's just that. Thus comes the end of phase the first, and we get into phase the second, and it really clears up what happens, because Tess is like, bring me home, please and thank you. Alex acting like he never did anything wrong, and he's a jerk. And there's this one part, and it really stuck with me, and I feel like it's definitely worth mentioning. There's apparently this missionary that goes around town with this red paint and will write on fence posts and stuff like commandments and Bible verses. And one of this, it says, "It was with sudden flush that she read and realized what was to be the inscription he was now halfway through." And so this guy, she sees the guy that's writing them, and it says, "Thou shalt not commit," and then dash. So he never says it, but that's in the Ten Commandments, that thou shalt not commit adultery, which is sex outside of marriage, and that sort of thing. So phase the second progresses with a scene in a field, and there's this big group working on harvesting something or other. And it falls on this one girl who stands out among the group, and eventually she's brought a baby. And as it turns out, it's Tess. So Tess has a kid, which beyond this, thou shalt not commit adultery, the whole kid thing really seals that little gap in the story. She's really sad. She doesn't go outside a lot, She goes out at night at this point. Essentially, this kid, in the eyes of this time period, was already a sinner. He was already damned to hell because he was born out of wedlock. As would be Tess's luck, the kid gets really, really sick, and he's not even baptized. And it's obvious at this point to them that the child is going to die. So not only is he like a messed up, like out of wedlock kid, now he's not baptized. So he's going not only to hell, he's going to a very special corner in hell with the murderers and the drunks and the people who committed suicide. She ends up having to baptize the kid herself in her house when the kid is dying, and she baptizes him Sorrow, and thus the child passes away, and thus passed away Sorrow the undesired. So into phase the third, it's where we start. She's going to go live on this dairy, and she's working on milking the cows. She recognizes one of the men working on the dairy. She's like, oh crap, it's the guy from the dance that I stood and watched him run away. This guy's name is Angel Clare, and he quickly becomes the man of her dreams. So alongside Tess, there's these three milkmaids that live on the property. Their names are Marion, Reddy Priddle, and Is Hewitt. They live with Tess. They all sleep in the same room. And as it stands, they're all in love, like madly, madly in love with Angel Clare. And that's a big issue, because they'll soon find out Angel likes Tess best. And that's tough for all of them. I feel like Thomas Hardy maybe over-exaggerates, or else people were just really emotional back in the 1800s. They're always crying and bawling. I can't imagine a life without Angel Clare, and they're all crying together. So on goes things, and nothing really important happens. They just milk cows, and Hardy explains them milking cows. Eventually it comes about, and Angel Clare's like, can't take it anymore. Tess, will you please marry me? I want you to be my wife, because A, you're really pretty and really nice to me, and I think we're cool for each other, and B, you're familiar with a farm, and I want to be a farmer, and I don't want to have a nice lady instead of a farming dairymaid as my wife. Tess is struggling with this because we all know what happened with her and Alec d'Urberville. Sex out of wedlock, sex outside of marriage, is it's a big deal back then, and she's stressing because she had a kid with another man, so she's struggling, and they go back and forth for probably 75 pages. Angel's like, will you marry me? And Tessa's like, I can't. And he's like, why not? Don't you love me? And she's like, well, yeah, but I can't. And he's like, well, tell me why not? And she's like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and he's like, so what's the deal? And she's like, I'll tell you next week. And he's like, how about Sunday? And she's like, Sunday sounds good. And then Sunday rolls around, and she's like, actually, I'll tell you tomorrow. And eventually she gives in, and she's like, you know what, fine, I give up, I love him too much, we're getting married. So it's like the night before the wedding, or like the day before the wedding, and Tess is like struggling because she still hasn't told him what went down with her and Alec, and she spills everything out onto a letter, and she writes a letter, she folds it up, puts it in an envelope, and slides it under his door. And the next day he comes down, he's acting the same. He's acting like nothing ever happened. They're like, ooh, like everything's good, like we're getting married today. And she goes upstairs to his room, and there's the letter under the carpet. So she thought he read it and forgave her right away, and they'd just be like that, and nothing would ever talk about it. And so he's coming down the stairs, and they're like about to get married. They're legit like about to be on their way to go get married. She's like, no, like, dude, I have to tell you something. And he's like, I have to tell you something too. We'll wait until later. She's like, and he's like, no, we're waiting until later. And she's like, so they get married and everything's great. They're going to stay in this place while Angel learns to work at a mill so that he can be a miller. And it's like the night they've been married, just madly like in love, enamored with each other. And they sit down and like, so you were going to confess to me? And Tessa's like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And I was like, I'll go first. There was this one time I was out, had a little bit too much. I was hanging out with this lady, and it was just a one-time thing. I slept with her once, that's it. Like, nothing else happened since then. And Tess is like, well, actually, that's great. Oh my gosh, like, I'm so thrilled that you said that because I have this to tell you. And she spills everything about Alec. And she's so relieved because he had sex out of marriage and she did too. So, like, it's kind of even, I guess. And then this is what is regarded as the big moment of hypocrisy. She thinks everything's good. Angel's like, what? No. It's not cool if you were raped and you're not a virgin and you already had a kid with someone. Like, why the hell would you think that's alright? And Tess is like, oh, shoot, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, this isn't good. Tess is just begging, pleading with him, being like, please forgive me. Like, I forgave you. I thought we were even. Like, it wasn't even my fault. And she's just trying desperately. And Angel's like, no, like, I can't see past that. Because Tess is like, oh, well, I guess we can get divorced then. And Alec's like, no, you simpleton. Like, how could you even think that? You're dumb. And so that happens, and basically they decide that, like, Tessa's going to go home to her mom, and Angel's going to figure himself out, and that's going to be that. So Tess goes home, and Angel goes on his way. So at this point, Angel's decided that he wants to go to Brazil. So Tess decides she's going to go get another job, and so she does. And she meets Marion, who is one of the dairymaids, and that's like a weird connection. So Tess, in a moment of panic, she's like missing Angel terribly, because at this point they've been apart for almost a year. And they separated, but it was established that sort of like they were still in love. It's just like Angel's morality wouldn't let him see past it. She decides she's gonna go see Angel's parents and be like, hey, can you actually like help me out? I kind of need some money. And so she goes. Eventually, she hears his brothers talking about, not even directly about her, but they're just like, ugh, can't believe our brother married a dairymaid. What the heck? And so she gets sad, and she never meets the parents. And as she's walking back to the farm that she lives on and works on, into this inn to like get some food, and there's no one there, and she's like, well, why isn't anyone there? And the guy who owns the inn is like, they're all at this guy. He's like a ranter who said he was like a changed man and all that stuff. And she sees this gathering, and she sees the ranter like it's this like Christian like, ooh, yeah, God. And he's like, ooh, convert your ways so that you can be good again. And she's walking by, and then she's like, oh, shoot, it's Alec. So Alec ends up dipping out of his service and like sprinting and being like, Tess, it's me. Hey, buddy. Like, what's up? I'm a changed guy. And Tess is like, get away from me. You raped me, you frickin' weirdo. And she basically is like, no, go away. She's working one day. She's doing some work in the fields for her farm. And Alex shows up. He just rolls up, because he legit stalks her the whole book, and now he's stalking her again. And he shows up and he's like, "So, Tess, can you? I'm a really changed guy. Like God came to me. He's like, God came to me, and he showed me the way. I'm actually thinking about going and doing some missionary work in Africa. But here's the thing: I need a wife. Will you marry me?" And Tess is like, "Hell no, you raped me, dude. I'm not gonna marry you." Gets all mad at Tess for being like, "No, I don't want to marry you." Like, all right, so cut to Angel, who's in Brazil. He's sick. He's had a fever. He's doing terribly. He's been reflecting all these months. He's like, "Shoot, I still love her, and I need to go home." Feels really bad. From there, cut to Tess. Tess is in this bar, and her little sister, Lizalu, shows up at wherever she is, and is like, "You need to come home. Like, Mom's really sick, and Dad's not doing too hot either." So now she's back in Marlet, her home, and she's hanging out, and her parents are really, really sick, and she's working one day in the fields because that's what you do when you're in Marlet. So she was working in the fields, and she's working with this guy, and he's got like this mask on his face, and she looks up, and it's frickin' Alec. He stalked her all the way back to Marlet. What the? That's wicked rude. It's obnoxious. He like keeps popping up, and from there, they're running back to the house, and the children are outside, and then they're like, "I think something happened." As it turns out, Tessa's dad died. He's gone. Now this is a big deal because in that time where they were living, I don't really understand how all the customs work, but essentially they get kicked out if there's not a man in the house. So since the dad's dead, they get kicked out of the house they were living in. And Tess goes home, it's like her last day, and she writes this letter to Angel, and she's like, "Why have you treated me so monstrously? Like, everything you've done to me, like, I don't think I can forgive this anymore. I've waited for you, I love you, I've done everything I can for you to forgive me, and you left." And she's like, "It is all injustice I have received at your hands. I will try to forget you." So, like, she's done with Angel. Alec d'Urberville keeps showing up again and again. It's like annoying at this point. Like, I love this book, but it's like obnoxious how many times Alex shows up at the expense of like 80 pages. He's just like, "I'm back, but I'm gone. But I'm stalking you." So as it stands, and then Angel decides he's coming home, and he finally gets the letters that Tess had written to him because they go to his parents. He finally gets them, and he's reading them, and he's like, "I need to go find her." And so he goes out to find her. He runs all over the place because it's like kind of like at the farm, and then she was in Marlet, and then she went to this other place to go live like in a lodging house because they can't live in their house anymore, and then she's not there, and no one really knows where she is, and he shows up where he finally finds her. Angel does. He walks into this boarding house, and he's like, "Hey, can you find Teresa d'Urberville for me?" And they're like, "Okay." And Tess comes down, and Angel's like, "Tess, I'm home for you. Like, I'm so sorry. I love you." And Tess is like, "You're too late. Alex upstairs in my room. Like, I live with him now." And obviously Angel's devastated at this. So at this point, we don't really have anyone to like in the story anymore. So, this is when it starts to get really crazy. It's in the last few pages of the book. Angel leaves, and then the lady who owns the boarding house where Tess and Alec were living sees Tess leave with this veil over her face, and then all of a sudden she's walking in the dining room, and she sees these spots on the dining room table or whatever it is, and it's this big scarlet bloom as he describes it, and she runs upstairs, and there's this drip, and she busts in, and bam, there's Alec d'Urberville, and he's dead, from an apparent stab wound. And then cut to Angel. Here comes Tess. She's like sprinting along the road. She's like, "Yo, I killed him because I love you, okay? So, like, I really, really love you because, I killed this dude and all that." And the first thing was like, "You did what? Like, dude." And then he's like, "Oh, wait, actually, you do love me. We kind of have to go though because you murdered someone and they're gonna be coming for you. And they walk on, and then some stuff happens, and they stay in this abandoned mansion, and then they eventually leave there, and they're like in love, and they're so happy. Everything's so great, and eventually they're walking, and they wind up somewhere, and it turns out it's Stonehenge. And Tess is like, can we not go any further? Like, I just want to rest here. It's beautiful, and it's nice, and I just want to hang out. Tess kind of says, look, if anything happens to me, will you marry Liza Lou? Because she's just this sweet, pure individual. And then eventually she falls asleep. There's this man that shows up. And Angel starts scrambling for a weapon. And the guy's like, you got no chance. There's like 16 of us and one of you. And he's like, Angel's like, just let her sleep. And Angel walks over. And Tess is like, have they come for me? And Angel's like, yes. And the last line of dialogue we hear from Tess and the whole book is, I am ready. So the concluding scene of the book, we see this town, and there's this pair walking in the town, and it's Angel and Liza Lou. It describes there's this big thing in the middle, and what Hardy says is that justice had done its deed or whatever. A black flag was raised to punctuate what had happened. So what this means, basically, I think, is that Tess was executed for her murdering of Alec d'Urberville, all because she loved Angel so much. So, in the end, nothing's happy. Like, yeah, Angel's with Liza Lou, and yeah, like, Alec d'Urberville's dead, but Tess has been executed, all because she just wanted to love. And it's really tragic, and it's very, very sad, I have to say. If you're watching this and, like, panicking because you didn't read the book, I really recommend you go and read the last 6 or so pages, because they are among the most powerful passages in a book that I've read to date. It's really sad. If you're watching this to try and, like, get a summary of the book, I actually recommend that no matter how far you are, you do go and finish it, because I personally developed such an attachment to Tess. I got so absorbed in this book. Like, it is a work. It's a masterpiece, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to read. So yeah, that's Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. Tragic. I'm gonna do like a real quick, like, basically like 6-point, maybe 10-point summary of the main points in the book, right? So they find out they're part of the D'Urbervilles. Alec rapes Tess. Tess meets Angel, and they get married. Angel finds out about the rape thing and leaves. Alec shows up again and ends up back with Tess. Tess kills Alec, and Tess gets executed, I think. But yeah, so that's Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy on that really positive note. Thanks, guys, for watching. If you actually are watching this all the way to the end, because as I'm recording it, it might be like a 30-minute video. But yeah, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll make more of these in the future. Bye.
Afraid of criminals. I don't want to be afraid of dangerous politicians. I don't want to be afraid of you, or of me, or the truth.